Good afternoon and welcome to another webinar. We have a huge audience of 351 business leaders this time. I'm particularly pleased that this series is getting so much attention, and also particularly pleased to see that we've got a number of people returning who've attended the previous webinars on M&A and exit, on business growth and other things on AI and so on as well. I'm sure you all know Freeman Clarke. We are the largest and most experienced team of IT leaders in the world. We work on a fractional and flexible basis for our clients. We're completely unbiased, and we work exclusively in the mid-market. Today, I am joined by three of my colleagues, and also by Suri Teja from Microsoft. Suri advises leadership teams on how to use AI to drive real outcomes across productivity, growth, and decision making. So today we've got a new approach where we're focusing our discussion on 4 specific business scenarios that where we've been working with clients, and I'm very confident that at least one of these is going to be relevant to every business leader on the call. So our aim today is to help you cut through the hype, cut through the complexity and noise and the constant change, and work out where you can take action to genuinely improve your business performance and drive growth. So before we get into that conversation, I promise I'll stop talking in a moment. Before we get into that conversation, what we wanted to do was start by talking a bit about some of the news that we're all reading about how AI is affecting the jobs market in the UK and indeed globally, and what's really going on here. So I've got 3 examples in front of me. Amazon cutting 16,000 jobs globally, Hewlett-Packard cutting 5,000 jobs, and Morgan Stanley saying UK jobs particularly badly affected. I think in the UK also we're reading a lot about young people, and particularly youngsters who are not in employment, education and training, and to what extent is AI driving some of that problem. So let's talk about this for a while and see what we are really hearing from our clients and what we're really hearing in the market. And I was going to start with Steve. I think you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I do. Well, the first thing is I'm going to give you another figure. I'm going to give you Klarna, who in 2025 dropped 1,200 people, 24% of their workforce, with an AI first strategy. And within 6 months, immediately started rehiring them. And most of this was in customer service. And I think one of the things that I've always remembered when I was sort of being taught IT by somebody was adoption. And adoption is down to the pace of Auntie Betty and Uncle Brian. So it's great developing all this stuff. It's great throwing out there and creating a world of possibility. And it's great adopting it. But actually, the pace of adoption is going to be dictated by society in general. And therefore, we can try and push this. We can be agitators. We can be disruptors. But actually, society has to choose to adopt some of this stuff and has to get comfortable with working with it and using it. So I do see there is a step change coming. But a societal change will take a number of months and years, not days and weeks.
Jerry?
Yeah, so I would jump in to say that of course, when you're looking at a very large company and they're talking about replacing an entire team of customer services people, then of course they can then announce a big job cuts. But of course, when we are working with smaller companies, their customer support team may be much smaller in the first place. So even if there is a 20-25% efficiency gain in that team, then you can't necessarily lose people immediately. In fact, the cases that we've seen so far, at least a couple of them have been cases where the team was slightly running behind on support tickets to clients. So that extra capacity that was enabled just meant that they were now fully on top of their work. So you don't necessarily see the saving directly in dropping people out of the business.
I have to say that extra capacity is the message that we are hearing primarily, and I still come back to the example at one of our conferences. where we, a whole bunch of our people were there, and they were probably representing 300 or 400 clients in that meeting. And we asked the question, how many of them are driving AI programs in order to reduce, to slash people kind of thing? That wasn't the message at all. That wasn't the message at all. There were a handful, but the majority of them was about enabling growth and enabling expansion. What about this specific question of new starters and developing talent in organizations? What are we seeing out there?
Well, so there's still plenty of opportunities for smart people, but interestingly, there when we've talked to companies where the jobs require, let's say, in the past, there's been an assistant or somebody at a lower level doing work, which then the more senior people can then use, and some of that work is definitely more easily replaced with some fairly simple AI tools. And so there is a bit of pressure at that end. However, you are also seeing some cases where smart people who are working at a lower level, they're now essentially managing their own little suite of AIs
Yeah.
and being much more productive. So it's not quite as simple as just saying that young people are going to be put out of action by this versus older people. It's not so simple.
And often it's the case that young people, as ever, are more digitally literate and more able to adopt these things. And, it reminds me, I don't know about your experience, but I remember when I first started that I was expected to do things like photocopying because some of the old guys in the
Yeah.
office didn't know how to use the staplers and the sorters and the clever features of the photocopier. So I think in the same way, that it may well be that young people who are enabled to and encouraged to are able to lead some of this stuff. And it's not about, being a trainee isn't anymore about the there was a time when accountants were taught neat handwriting for those giant ledger sheets, wasn't there? And obviously that's just an absurd example now. There'd be
But
no point.
and interestingly, talking to a group of chief execs the other day, we were all agreeing that actually the number one most important thing to teach young people, if you want them to have a good future in work, is the skills around communication and empathy and being able to relate to people and make good connections with other people, because those skills are going to be needed regardless.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And on the subject of new people, I was on a call at 9 o'clock last night to some guys in the States, and the head of AI for a new business, who is 19, I think, I said, "So what was your background?" He said, "Well, last week I was doing pizza delivery in New York, and before that I was doing a communication course, but I've been passionate about this stuff for years." And he was there working with 50 CEOs, helping them to get their AI act together. And that just picks up Jerry's point about there's an emerging pool of new talent that will rise to the top faster than you would have expected in the past, because they don't have to go through all the normal apprenticeship steps. They just show the capability.
Okay, let's try and get into the meat of this conversation then, and these four examples that we were going to focus on that I think are relevant to a lot of business leaders on the call. So the first one in here is about B2B prospecting. The UK mid-market, like most mid-markets, is dominated by B2B, and B2B sales has always been and probably will always be, the kind of lead generation challenge will probably always be the main issue for any business leader. I mean, I think we were asked a number of questions about this. One of the questions beforehand, Richard is in the transport distribution space, asking about utilizing AI to help with the purchasing processes for their clients. We had Mark, MD of a retail business, asking about customer and sales process automation. We had Caroline from an accounting business, Peter, chief executive in education business. They're all asking about the sales funnel and the marketing funnel, but particularly in the area of B2B prospecting. What can you talk a bit about that, Brian?
Yeah, so we're working with clients, looking at processes that can use AI to automate each of these steps. So we're building out a 27 agent process that starts with clients analyzing who their best customers are, and not who they think their best customers are, but what the data says they are. And then it goes off and it finds lookalikes. It says in all the other potential businesses, who most matches that profile. And then it will go away and it will research them individually. It'll find their pain points. It'll find their industries. It'll find who's just joined. It'll find who's just leaving. Um, and then creates a completely personalized outreach. So instead of saying, "Dear Mr. Business, you may or may not be interested in this proposition," it's, "We see you've just moved offices and hired a new procurement guy. People in your space are also doing these kinds of things," and these resonate. And so to bring it to life with one of our clients, they were doing outreach to new prospects and saying, "Would you like to buy this product with a normal degree of success?" One of their challenges was upselling, so we changed the message to actually be relevant to the client, to talk about their backstory, talk about their pain points, and they moved the needle from an average of one sale when they made a sale to four sales because it was personalized, it was relevant, it made sense to them. And all of these steps are now happening automatically. So of course there's a human in the loop to close the sale and pick up the work at the end. But these steps are happening and are doing the research that a sales team just doesn't have the time for.
Jerry, Steve, Suri.
Yeah.
Right, Steve, you're muted, I'm afraid.
From my perspective, I've got a client who has got a very specific sell in B2B, but what is influenced in that B2B transaction is what some of the leaders in that organization share socially around their social and particularly about well-being. So from that perspective, you can't just go and buy a mailing list for that. You can't go and buy that from Jordan's. And that's where we're finding that effectively successful hit rate has gone up by 400% because we're now marrying social activity to appropriately sized businesses with leaders that could take advantage of what's being offered. So for us, it's about being able to reboundary what we're searching for, and that's then returning. That then opens up significantly more opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this ourselves at a small scale, haven't we, Jerry? Where we've had spreadsheets of scores of companies, and we've wanted to say, right, which of these look like potentially good opportunities for us? And that would have been really too labor intensive to bother doing. Whereas now we're able to do that within a few seconds. What we're trying to move up to is the kind of stuff Brian is talking about, and I think a lot of organisations are saying, well, how can I move that into the thousands or the tens of thousands or the hundreds of thousands of businesses, and really change this from just being a shotgun approach to actually being much more intelligent or artificially intelligent.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's gonna be a lot more happening in this field over time, and with any kind of outreach, there's a bit of a, well, potentially, I suppose, there's a bit of an arms race will go on where people who are good at this will then get some really good advantage, and it allows you to be, I guess, a lot more personal with your approaches to companies that you're reaching out to. That's where certainly we found it internally that we were getting an edge. And because you can much more quickly find out more information about the people and the businesses that you're reaching out to, so you can be way more relevant in what you're.
Yeah, their likely issues, which of our products or services are likely to fit with theirs, what are likely to be the effective sales messages. This is the stuff of B2B selling. And all of a sudden it's possible to empower your people to be as good as the best. I think that's the way to look at it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So can we roll straight from this then to the next example, Jerry, which is about outbound appointment setting?
Yeah, so this is interesting. This is been around a while in the US, I'd say, and because having voice calls, or sometimes people call them robot calls, has perhaps a little bit more accepted over there than it perhaps is here in this country. But you're seeing it being more and more popular, and certainly the evidence would suggest that I'm getting more calls myself of that type. So this is where you would have an AI voice agent doing a job that perhaps a regular human would have done in the past. But there are cases where this is genuinely useful and cases where it's annoying. So having a robot call you up as a sales call is probably not ideal. But we were intrigued, and recently we'd had one of our suppliers has been working with many companies on this, and one of the examples was a plumbing company that they are able to set appointments for using an AI voice agent. And the remarkable thing about this was that people were accepting of it because they were expecting a call, and therefore they were expecting an appointment to be set up. And when you looked at the statistics of how many of those automated calls were successfully completed with an appointment, it was just as high as it was with the human agents, but of course a lot more efficient. So that's clearly showing that people are being more accepting of this. One of the biggest differences, of course, as a tip in this country, is more of a cultural thing. We don't like to be hoodwinked, I don't think, despite our love of April 1st jokes. But we actually don't like to be hoodwinked. And so it's actually better if the AI agent announces itself and says, look, I'm an automated agent, but then proceeds to talk as if they were a person. That's fine. So, and of course it can go wrong. I mean, I had a call the other day where I had an agent call me, and I, on purpose, tried to see whether I could get it to say something silly, and of course it is possible sometimes to do that. So I ended up having this discussion with an agent that was trying to talk to me about the car finance scam thing that's going on, and I ended up being able to get it to tell me the recipe for a mint and strawberry margarita, which was crazy. But that just showed how when you're implementing these things, they can be implemented well, and then they can be implemented with insufficient boundaries that allow the thing to start talking about other stuff that's not relevant. So so it seems that they're particularly good already when you give them good narrow use cases. So in this case, it was booking plumbing and appointments. And in fact, recently we've just been talking to one of our clients who's in the property business about setting appointments for their people to go and visit properties. And that looks like a really strong use case, and it will be, because it's narrow. People are expecting the call. It can answer questions, and it can deal with the human interactions and get you what you need, which is a booked appointment.
I mean, I think, and an appointment setting call is bound to be transactional. No one's got any other illusions about that. So I wouldn't mind getting that from an AI. So if it's quick and simple, and it might be quicker and simpler and easier than talking to a human. And if you are the company organising these, then the obvious benefit is that you can do this from whatever hours you choose to, with the number of retries you choose to, and you can kind of effectively program in the least annoying and most effective way to do it at the lowest cost. But most importantly, rather than customer service being bogged down with appointment setting, they can actually be dealing with things of value. I mean, I think that's the key point. You don't necessarily need to use this to slash your costs. You can use it to ensure that your customer service people are providing customer service rather than setting appointments.
That's exactly the point, because I would defy any business owner to say that they couldn't think of something that they could give somebody to do if only they had an extra day in a week, right? So even if you haven't got a whole person that you freed up, just like if you just give me one extra resource for an hour a day, I can do something with that, and you will generate extra value. So that's the way to look at this.
Any other examples of kind of robotization of sort of what used to be person-to-person communication that's worth sharing?
I would just say, with the introduction of generative AI now, that the voice is much more sophisticated now, and when customers are interacting with these agents, it's a much more realistic experience, rather than your traditional voice agents you used to, where you're very limited in the conversation you can have. So it can be very, very realistic now.
And Brian, of course, we were talking recently about avatars on websites as a means of engaging with prospects and potentially them sharing information they wouldn't, otherwise have shared, not because you're trying to extract information, but because it can give you a better understanding of what people are really looking for, in that they might take part in something more like a natural language conversation.
Yeah, we find that people are unguarded when they're talking to conversational agents if it's a natural conversation. And one of the businesses we work with, they started logging all the unanswered questions and all the frustrations. And so every day the CEO would log in and say, right, well, what's upsetting my customers today? What do they want to know? And then they'd go and create some marketing material, they'd do some outreach. And as a result of that, not only did they cut their support calls by 2/3, but they increased their sales by 25%. And he discovered that after 22 years, for the first time, his customers for his high-end audio products thought they might be noisy, and that was news to him. No one had ever told him. So he then rebadged his things as noise-free.
It's a really good point that, that perhaps one thing that business owners will always be asking themselves is, what do my prospects and customers really think? What do they really want? What do they really believe? And any insight into that is gold dust, isn't it?
Yeah. And the other point as well is, if every customer interaction can immediately be handled by an AI conversation, an AI solution, rather than put into an email queue for a 3-day response, you've got far more chance of engaging your customer or your prospect and moving the business forward.
Yeah.
Okay, let's roll forward then on to the next example, which is about internal knowledge access. Sorry, can you talk about this example?
Yes, so this is I would say, one of the key use cases I see when I'm working with my customers. It's one of the sort of number one use cases that customers move forward with. It's fairly straightforward to implement and it's high impact. So I know we're going to talk about agents later, but if you think about an agent, it is basically a digital employee that knows your business and can take an action. So there's been a real shift from the AI productivity tools like ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot to now this world of AI agents, agentic AI. So the agents understand your company's data and documents. They work across all your systems and they take actions, not just give advice. So in this case, a lot of organizations have lots of data. It's all over the place, scattered everywhere. It's in third-party systems, it's in SharePoint sites, it's in Teams, it's in emails. So essentially what the agent does is it brings all of that together into, an agent is sat over the top of it, brings it all together and surfaces it for your employees, right? So whether it's your sales team, your customer service team, it's allowing employees to get access to information quickly, get the correct information as well. And, what we're generally seeing is just huge amounts of time being saved, better quality responses. And, it's, people not having to chase people, answers are consistent. And ultimately, it can help in sales to help with your deal cycles, faster sales conversions. It can help in customer service, being able to respond to to customer queries quickly and get them resolved first time. So they're the sorts of things we're seeing with a knowledge agent. It's very, very simple to implement with the tools that we have today, and very high impact.
I mean, I think that this is perhaps the simplest and most obvious area to start. We've done this ourselves. There are countless examples of where businesses have got stacks of documents and knowledge. And the example that we went for internally is that where we are running internal training sessions on our systems, on our sales and marketing and contracting and finance systems and all the rest of it. All of those have now been recorded, and all of those transcripts and recordings are now in one place. So you can just ask natural language questions of them. So, and that, it's not, it wasn't a whole lot of effort, and it is an incredibly powerful tool and can answer pretty much any questions on any of our systems and internal systems and processes now. I also think this relates to the previous conversations about prospecting and customer service, particularly in the B2B space, where I think we see there's always an 80-20. and you normally, most businesses will want to ensure that with their high value customers that they are providing a strong personal service with the ability to kind of cross sell and upsell and genuine account management. And then they'll often have a long tail of people who have complicated queries. How do they service that without it becoming enormously expensive? Or a long tail of activities like the appointment setting, this kind of thing, how do they service that without it becoming an issue? So this whole area of access to knowledge, I think, is transformational for mid-market businesses.
Yeah, I agree, Graham. For me, the other key point is that a single expert isn't scalable, and every company wants to grow. And there's been many cases where we've seen this. So an engineering consulting firm I was with the other day, they had a particular person who just knows everything about everything. And so they're the go-to person to go and ask. And that's great for the clients that he's talking to. But everyone else who doesn't have that knowledge is then kind of queuing up to ask him questions, and that's great, but doesn't work, and it doesn't get the knowledge out there quickly enough. And so by doing this kind of sharing of knowledge through an AI knowledge base, it's so much easier to get the right answers. And actually, there's a side effect, which is that people who then use a knowledge base like that, they get through more work and they get to see the good answers themselves. So those people are also being uplifted with their own knowledge because they see they're seeing the good answers. So it's really very, very powerful powerful thing to implement.
I think
I think we always see with mid-market businesses that there are a relatively small number of experts who've been there for years who know everything. And when that person's on holiday, the whole thing can fall apart.
Yeah.
Or if that person loses their spreadsheet, then you might as well pack up and go home. It often comes down to this kind of stuff, doesn't it? Steve, did you have a thought on this?
Yeah, I think there's another aspect to it as well, because we often see knowledge bases as a font of something that we extract information from.
Mm-hmm.
But they can actually be great for training people as well, in that one of the best things you can ever ask a knowledge base, if it's natural language, as well as asking it for what you want, the other question is there anything I should have asked?
Mm.
And then you can actually use it to enhance learning, not just to answer the immediate query. So we often underutilize, even having put the knowledge base in, we often underutilize them. And it's just training people to ask the right questions of it is half of the challenge.
One of the questions we got was from John Warchus, who we've known for years at Moore Barlow, and was asking about AI tools in the legal sector, which is a particular area where this is important. And we've done some really interesting work there with clients about trying to, I don't want to say institutionalize because that carries the wrong impression, but trying to gain the benefit of their experts and make that company asset rather than individual asset. Are any of you able to talk about those examples?
I'll jump in, Graham. So,
Yeah, go on.
working with a fairly large size law firm, there were kind of two aspects to what they're doing. One was they would have to do a lot of case research for one of their cases. They'd have to get reports, interviews, scientific results, and so on. And that was very painstakingly manual. So this is classic AI. Can an agent do it quicker and better and free up the team? But the more significant thing then was looking at the propensity of the deal to win and was it worth taking to court? And that's where you need to go back, as Steve and Siri and others were saying, about going into the previous history of cases to say what were the characteristics that were most likely to indicate success. And therefore this one is 70% likely to succeed, we'll proceed with it. This one's 20%, we won't bother.
Right. So it moves you past kind of just the individual gut feel into something which is perhaps more justifiable and more data-based analysis. Though, of course, we can get into an interesting conversation about AI in that respect, can't we? Just to remind people that if they want to submit any more questions, we've got a Q&A window, and I'd welcome any more. We've got a stack of questions that were submitted as part of the registration process, and I'm trying to include those as we go. And also, there's another couple here that have been asked, and I'll try and feed those in as we go along as well. But can we switch over now to the fourth example that we thought would be good to share, which is about market and customer sentiment. Steve, can you describe this? And also, can I just relate it particularly to a question asked by Tim, Chief Exec of a consumer products business, who's asking about how can AI help with a challenger brand in consumer goods?
Okay, yeah. So I'll do the first part around market and sentiment analysis for us as a business, whoever we are as a business, and then I'll talk about the challenger brand. So you said it earlier, Graham, getting that immediate feedback about what a customer really thinks of you. That is gold dust. I'm quoting you from earlier on in this webinar. So often the idea of how do I actually go and do research about what my customers think about me, what the industry thinks about me, what my employees think about me, that's been the realms of corporates, because you need a PR agency, you need them to then do some desk-based research. What they have to do then is take that desk-based research, and then they have to think about what that means, and then they have to come and present a lovely report to you. And lo and behold, you spent 10, 20, 30,000 pounds. Now, for a lot of mid-market companies, that would be an amazing thing to have. But can you justify the spend? Well, here's where a really simple, just standard GPT can help you. So I literally created a 3-line prompt, and I said to it on a free GPT, I said, go and do some sentiment analysis about Freeman Clarke. And I want you to compile a report as a market researcher and give me the sentiment analysis around Freeman Clarke as a business. You don't need to worry about employee sentiment, because we're predominantly a hub and spoke business with lots of people who are freelance working around the hub. But do focus on what the market thinks about us, focus on what customers think about us. And that went along and it thought for 7 minutes and then came back with a 14-page report, 1 page of which was 10 recommendations, which we ran past our marketing department. And the marketing department's quote is, we're going to take it up on those recommendations. Now that was £20,000 and 6 weeks of elapsed time in a free GPT in 8 minutes. And then I had to say to it, actually, you formatted this a little bit wrong. You've given me a blank page. You went, oh, I'm really sorry. It went back and it reformatted it so it was acceptable. I'm not sure, but I think we might actually be prepared to share that report, because it literally is what came out of the query.
Yeah, happy to, and it exactly demonstrates how easily, I don't want to decry what you've done there, but once you have the skills, how you can do things like this, that would have been so difficult in the past.
Yeah, and you've compressed the timescales, you've got an action plan to work with. So I'm not saying we shouldn't spend money with marketing agencies, right? What I am saying is, let's choose how we spend the money with the marketing agencies. And once we've got that report, we can sit down with them and we can go, give us your view based on this report about what the action plan should be. We've got a 1-page action plan, but actually we want to spend some money in implementing some of this. That's the right place to spend the money with the agencies, rather than doing that initial desk-based research.
I can tell you for a fact that getting an external report on our brand reputation and so on has been on our list for about the last 3 or 4 years, and was the kind of thing that we sort of just didn't want to afford to do. But what you're saying is that, well, I've seen the report. It's great, really helpful. But what does that mean, just out of interest, to the agencies that would do those kinds of reports?
Well, I think it means that they have to upshift their game. So effectively, what we got was a very straightforward piece of analysis. We can give that to an agency and say, these 3 areas where it's recommending that we do this, can you actually come back and do some planning around that? Can you tell us which would give the most impact? And of course, they're going to use AI to help them do that. So, we're all lifting the bar together. So transactions will still occur, commerce will still occur. We're just raising the bars together. To bring it back to the challenger brands, well, what we said about Freeman Clarke, we could have equally said, I am a new tea manufacturer. I've got new brands of teas. I want to go out into the marketplace and I want to look at all the established tea brands, and I want to understand what people don't like about them. Compile me a report about my top 5 competitors, about what I can do as a challenger brand to make them feel uncomfortable. And it's exactly the same technique. It's exactly the same semantic and sentiment analysis, just pointed outwards, not inwards.
And picking up on that, Graham, the challenger brand thing, this is where AI can do that research on competitors in the blink of an eye. And something I came across the other day, which I didn't know what it meant, mimetic research. And mimetic research is talking about I want what other people want. And so what you do is you do that research on the other brands, and it says, well, company X is promoting low cost, company Y is promoting high quality, company Z is promoting, you know, Gen Z appeal. If you want to compete in this market and be different, here are the angles that you might, given what we know about your product, want to exploit, but don't go with the same ones as everybody else because you'll look me too. And that's particularly important as a challenger brand. You've got to stand out in a dimension that the others can't compete with.
So in a way, this kind of capability commoditizes the research and the knowledge gathering at some level. But what it doesn't do at all is diminish the value of taking action. And in many ways, as you said, Steve, it moves us all up into that higher value activity of, so what are we going to do about this? So I can look anything up now and I can get any amount of information. But you know, I mean, I would say the same, looking at that legal question, is any lawyer who thinks their job is just to tell me the law, well, they're going to have a problem. But I still need to know what to do with it. And so all what this does is it gives us all the ability to do more. And I actually think that takes us all the way back to the discussion about how does this affect jobs. Well, what it does is it moves everyone up into the space of doing stuff, rather than learning the neat handwriting for filling in the big ledger sheets as people used to do.
And I would add that it also will give more advantage to people clearly where there's more information that's been posted about them. So obviously some companies have loads posted about them, particularly in consumer world, of course. But even B2B companies, some companies are much more, I don't know, public. They get talked about more. And so you'll get better results because AI thrives on data, and more data is a good thing for it. And so if there were only 2 posts on Twitter or X about your company, then that's probably not very particularly helpful, even with that AI analysis. So there's a little bit of a caveat, but I suspect that but this is another thing you can also ask an AI to do, is to tell you, well, how much was posted? Is there a wealth of information out there about my company, or am I just not being talked about?
One of the questions that's been asked here, which I think is interesting, and again it relates to the conversation at the beginning, is what do the panel believe entry level jobs will look like in the future? I don't want this to kind of be a future gazing session, because I'd rather talk about clients and what we are seeing. But are we seeing in our clients that using the AI to do this stuff, whereas gathering the research used to be an entry-level job, are we saying now that using the AI to gather the research is now the entry-level job? Is that what we're saying?
Well, there's a lot of bits to this. With one of our clients, the candidates that they were finding were the ones that had used AI to find the job, applied because they thought that they were going to be given the opportunity to enhance their skills with AI, and were the ones that said, I've come in an operational support role, but I actually fancy having a go at sales because that's my passion. I found out who runs sales, let me get over to them. So it's about attracting the right people and giving them the headroom to do what they need to do. And that's very different from how it was a year ago.
Interesting. So don't be negative about someone using AI to make a job application. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
The question is, why didn't someone use AI to help them with the job application? It's a bit like someone who says, well, my letter's handwritten because I can't use a computer. It would sort of be ridiculous, wouldn't it?
And it's not, I wrote my CV. It's, I loaded up all the information on the company and then it got it to ask me questions about it.
Yeah.
So I could practice showing my understanding of the industry and how I might fit in and what I can bring to the party. So that by the time I got to the actual interview, it was a very in-depth discussion about what I could do, not a superficial one.
Yeah.
The question then that we wanted to move on to is that for many business leaders, the question is how to start. Because the whole field is moving so quickly, there is so much hype, and I think there is genuinely an issue that before you've had a time to evaluate something, there is something new which is a competitor to it. So We would start with a client by running what we call an AI assessment, an AI opportunity assessment workshop, and Jerry will talk a bit about that later. But what's our general advice to business leaders in terms of how to initiate things that will make a difference for their business? Brian.
Okay, I'll start by saying what you shouldn't do. And I've just come back from a conference yesterday where one of the topics was which is the best LLM, best language model to use? And the answer is don't start with which tool, start with which problem you solve first. Um, and and the thing is, the question you need to ask is if you could address a problem within 90 days that everybody in the company would notice, then that's the place to start. It's about speed and it's about impact. Because once you've then got that momentum and that velocity going, then you can start moving up to the very biggest prizes of can I get more customers? Can I sell more to my customers? Can I retain them for longer? Can I increase the capacity of my team? If you actually start on the very strategic end, we find that some clients think, oh, I don't want to I don't want to take that risk. So the answer is find the thing that will have an impact. And we've just come back from a workshop where the CEO and the CFO and one of their operations guys came up with 9 opportunities, 9 priorities. But they collectively agreed that whilst improving, this was a construction business, whilst estimating was their number 1 priority, actually they were going to go for reskilling and training their 100-strong team by using AI to create a personal training program with personal content and personal style for each of their 100 people, because they could get it done in 90 days, it would impact everybody, and then they would move on to estimating.
One of the interesting questions that's been asked by Adam on the Q&A here is where does AI strategy sit in an organization? And that is a difficult question. And obviously we'd have our own axe to grind there, but it's more complicated than that, isn't it? What are your thoughts?
For me, it's the AI strategy it comes from the top, because it's always about choice about where to focus. So it's not which tools, which architecture, which data flows. It's about are we going to use AI to address customer service or customer sales or new product development or whatever? Because once you've chosen your one area, and not 10 areas, but one area, then you bring in the external resource that knows how to build it. You bring in whatever expertise to help you frame and manage the programs, and you bring in your best and brightest people, which may not be your most senior people, to work on it. But if it's not driven from the top, the risk is that you've got teams enthusiastically doing small projects that don't actually move the needle.
Yeah.
But there is an element of this which is bottom up, though, isn't there? There is an element of this
Yeah.
which is that people just want to use end user tools. And we certainly see this in our organization that people are saying, well, what should I use? Or people were saying, what should I use? And someone is using ChatGPT and someone in another team has bought the pro license and someone else is using Claude and someone else says, yeah, well, I just type everything into the WhatsApp AI. And so there is a need to create some governance around this and to empower people to do this well and securely and in an ethical way. Who owns that?
Well, you see, this happens every time you have a technology that's very easily accessible, just like it has been with mobile phones. You know, as soon as these things became ubiquitous and cheap, then any employee could see the benefit to themselves of having a mobile phone, and so they would have one. And then, of course, as soon as an employee has one, then it wasn't long before the company would say, "Oh, can I have that? Can you give me your number so that I can get a hold of you anytime?" And then eventually that turned into companies dishing out mobile phones. And of course, the leaders of those companies know that there's a business case and a use case for having that technology brought into their business. So there's always these two sides to it, but ultimately it's always got to be the leadership that decides how things should be used and where the most benefit is for that business, regardless of where it comes from. The trick is for those leaders to recognize those, let's call them mavericks, the ones who really want to make change and drive change, spot them and say, oh yeah, you're doing that thing there. That's brilliant. Why don't we roll that out to the rest of the team? That's the real class in leadership.
And bringing back that to real leadership, as you've said, one of the first questions I often ask when I'm talking with chief execs, because there's a danger that chief execs will actually make an assumption that they're border aligned with where they want to take this. And one of the first questions you should ask the entire board is, do we see AI as giving us the capability to build a rocket ship, or are we looking for a raft that's going to save us in our industry? And so you need to know whether the board wants to build a rocket ship or whether the board wants to build a raft. Because that dictates the strategy very much.
I was reviewing a strategy that we produced for a client in a professional services space, and it was all about exactly that, as you say, which is how are these roles going to change in the coming years? How is that business going to change? How is its market going to change? And what is its posture in terms of approaching that? I still don't think we've really answered this question. Let me give you this example. So Adam, chief exec of our hospitality travel business, asked, what small scale steps can our business take to move forward with AI? That was his question. What's the answer?
So Graham, I think Brian alluded to it before, but start small, pick one real business problem, try and use the tools you've already got. There are some obviously free tools out there. You need to be aware of the risks, like you said, about security, in terms of if you're putting company data into these tools, where's it going? Is it staying within your organization boundary, or is it training models, etc.? But try the tools, put in some guardrails and do a low risk pilot. And I always find what a great way of doing it is, what I'm seeing with some organizations is they're not hiring new people into their company. They're not bringing in third parties. They are looking at individuals who have a passion for AI and getting them to, do some of these projects. So, for example, the example I covered earlier about the knowledge agent, get some of these people in your company that are passionate about AI to build a knowledge agent, and they can build their skills up slowly from that and then take it from there.
Okay, so I think we're saying two things. I think we're saying there is a bottom up, which is about enabling people and helping people to use the technology as part of their everyday jobs. And there is a top down, which is about identifying the strategic intent of the business, the strategic opportunities, and trying to pursue some of those that, as Brian says, will make a noticeable difference in, let's say, 90 days.
And when you brainstorm these ideas, you find that often companies are peppered with examples of places where a very easy thing can be done and is not expensive, can be implemented quite quickly. There's usually several of those that you can do when you brainstorm, as well as the big areas where there's big costs and big drivers for growth. So it's really good to pick a few of those very small ones that are just super easy to do, because why not? Why wouldn't you just make them happen? And then, of course, go on to the big wins. Yeah. And then you it builds momentum. It helps people gain confidence that, that was the good thing to do. And
but let's also add something here, which is that in many cases, many of the things we've done have been remarkably inexpensive. I mean, we're not talking about big bets. We're not talking about, we've done some amazing things that have cost tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I mean, sometimes, a couple of £100. There's tools that we've seen implemented on, plugins for WordPress websites that cost a couple of £100 that are an AI tool that helps speed up how that website is developed, but also separately to optimize the website. I mean, there's all sorts of really interesting things that require virtually no effort.
Okay, dare I ask this question then, which was from Matthew, MD of an education business. And he asked, what are the key questions I need to be asking?
You need to be asking, for my biggest business challenge or biggest business ambition, what are people doing around the world using AI that is impacting this?
Yeah, okay.
And then when you've got the answer, oh, well, in the retail shoe industry in Vegas, they're doing this. Okay, how might I, utilize that in my roofing business in the Midlands?
Yeah, and I think, I think we have seen so many examples of people doing real things that we are able in most cases to say this is a good example of something that we've done. But you're right, a great place to start is to say what are other people doing about to use AI to address problems and opportunities like this.
Okay. I guess you could also ask yourself if you are thinking about the alternatives, then what would you be doing to improve your business differently that's not using AI? Because there's no reason that you should stop doing those other things. I mean, if you find that, if you run a warehouse and painting better white lines on the floor to organize the space better is going to make the warehouse more efficient, then go do that. No problem. But equally, look at the cost benefit and see whether it matches up to the benefits you'll get from having an AI try and predict where to put things in the warehouse.
Okay, let me roll on from this then to where AI is going and what's coming next. And let's talk a bit about agentic AI. This is an interesting area. We are probably going to hold another webinar about this in September. It's interesting because it's enormously powerful, potentially concerning from a business point of view. Jerry, can you tell us what this is all about and what it means?
Yeah, so it's got a few names, and people talk about agentic AI. They also talk about AI agents, and that's kind of the same thing. The root is, of course, from the word agency. So an AI agent is a piece of AI that you are giving agency to. You're allowing it to do stuff on its own, and giving it sort of autonomy to do that task. Potentially multiple times on its own, and you can give it a little bit of agency, you can give it a lot of agency to do work, and this is where some of the dangers come in. I mean, the reason why you might want to do this is, of course, I mean, take simple jobs like I often do research on companies, and rather than set the context for my AI, my query to the AI every single time, I've created an agent that knows how I want research to be done, where to go and get information, and how I want it presented. And so rather than going through a big long process, I can just tell it, oh, I've got another company. Can you just go and do a research document on this? And interestingly, an agent, here's an example of giving it more agency. I run this locally on my machine, and I allow it to write files to my machine, and I also allow it to convert them to different formats. I can say, can you convert that to a Word document? So it automatically does that because it knows that's how I prefer to have the answer. And all of that is me giving it permission to do that work without having to keep asking. And that is massively of benefit because it saves a huge amount of time, because I don't have to go through the process of explaining to a teenager every time exactly what I wanted, and then when it gets it wrong, tell it to do it right again. So it gets it right every time. It's certainly the way I'm using it. And so there's huge time saving and benefit in terms of the quality of output and the way it's done. And the benefit of then being able to link it to other tools, there's another, because this is the other side of agency, is when an AI agent is given the ability to reach out to other, let's call them system commands or tools that are on your machine, then it can do almost anything. So it is clearly possible to link it to email, to link it to your social media accounts. You could link it to, if you were, in my opinion, a bit going well out there, you could link it to your bank account or credit card, but I think that would be a step too far for me right now, to be able to purchase things on your behalf. But all these things are possible, but they're clearly fraught with danger right now, because there's a trade-off between what's the benefit versus what's the possible risk if all that goes horribly wrong. So this opens up a huge topic, and which is why we started talking about it, and I think it pretty quickly decided that, look, there's so much here. I think it is right to give this its own session, and we'll do that, I think, in later on in the year.
Yeah, so there are tools available, OpenClaw and these kinds of things, where a lot of people are sort of starting to sweat a bit, saying this is interesting technology that could potentially run amok. And as you say, if you've got tools that have access to your bank details and access to your logins, then you don't want to find out that this has been on the dark web
That's
buying,
right. And the big
guns
danger
and
is
drugs
that
on your behalf.
the big danger is that most of the time people who, when something says, please allow me to do this, and you just click yes, a lot of people don't know what they're saying yes to. And so there's the real danger. And so, which is why, for a technologist, if you like, looking at the technology and trying to learn it, it's kind of okay for us to be playing with it right now. But it's partly up to us to figure out on behalf of our clients what it is that's a reasonable behavior for AI agents at this point. And there are clearly some that are already absolutely good and worth doing. And in fact, there's there's a whole swathe of agents that one can run inside a business completely safely. And it's done, often, Microsoft is a prime example. They've got a whole swathe of agents that have been pre-built and things that you can customize that can be used really well. So this is as I say, it's a huge area, and this is going to be the site of massive growth over the next year or two.
Yeah, and Jerry, I would just add that, and we are creating a lot of first-party agents, as that's the direction of travel. So there's an agent that's specifically there to do research. There's another one that does data analysis. They have different models behind them, and they do them very well. And the sales agents, so you don't even need to build them anymore now. You can use a lot of those agents out of the box. Yeah.
Can I pick up on this and throw a couple of other phrases in as well? So Suri and Jerry have talked about the agents. I mean, last year you'd go to a language model and say, who are the best suppliers of office furniture in my area? But at the end of the last year, it became skills. So I've got a picture of my office. Can you turn it into a CAD drawing, or can you turn it into a layout to give to a carpet fitter or whatever? Then we've got the agents that Suri and Jerry are talking about that will do things for you. They'll take a research project, they'll go and find you some data. This month, because that was very much last month, so that's old hat now.
Yeah.
I think this month we're seeing orchestration. So building out training, having 6 streams of agents building training packages where the first one's researching the material, the second one's designing the program, the third one's QAing it, the fourth one's publishing it in 6 streams on 6 different topics. And this is what's happening. And this is the multiplier that we've been hearing about with AI. A single LLM will make you 20% faster. An agent will make you 50% faster. But when you have 30 agents running in 6 parallel streams, suddenly you're 100 times faster. And that's the game-changing bit. And we've seen 4 generations of capability change in 4 months here. So the danger is that if you're still debating this in October, guess what? Your competitors have already implemented it.
But to the point about the dangers here, Brian, this also gives you the ability to run 4 times as fast in the wrong direction, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So what is our advice to clients, particularly going back to the previous point that we've got junior members of staff who are using the AI and perhaps building the AI, and they create something, and then they put the company's LinkedIn credentials into the AI, and the next thing that's out seemingly to gather information from the LinkedIn universe, and actually what it starts doing is posting stuff in LinkedIn. What's our advice to companies? How should they police this? How should they manage it? How should they prevent this at this stage today, March 2026? How should they be governing this?
So the answer there is, if you're a big company, you can put in place the controls that limit where data flows, and that's okay because you've got the money to spend. But if you're a small business, less than 100 people, it's more about your AI policy that says you can use these tools and you can do what you want with it.
Yeah.
But these tools that are using external agents, do not put customer data in, do not put personal data in, do not put passwords and so on. And so it's about managing that process. And as Jerry would say, good luck the people that are putting in bank accounts, because that will be dangerous. So it's about having very clear, very simple policies and choosing the tools that you can use internally and the tools that you can use externally.
Okay, I'm going to stop us there. Jerry, can you take 50 seconds to talk about our AI opportunity assessment workshop, and when a customer comes to us and wants to move forward, what would we do?
Super. Yeah. Well, we've now run scores of these across clients, prospects, many companies. what the opportunity assessment does is it first off brings everyone on the same page. It makes sure that they understand the current state of AI, what's hype versus reality. We also look at what's mature in the market versus and usable versus just experimental at this stage, and what's coming soon, and what's probably coming in a year's time. So we go through all of that, and then we help you focus on, well, what are you brainstorm all the good ideas for the business. Where can we create value? And what you end up with is you end up being able to pick 2 or 3 really cool ideas that can be pushed ahead and move forward. And that's where the power lies. So
Fantastic.
we will help you do that any point. Just get in touch.
Thank you all very much. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to the audience. I've enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.